Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Joseph, with all the talk about Bakhmut and who's controlling it, I wonder about the strategic importance of it, because there doesn't appear to be much. Is it a psychological point as to the winner in Bakhmut?
Well, I think certainly the Russians seem to make it that way. I mean, they act, because it was back in June of a year ago, so almost a full year ago, when Ukrainian cities, small cities, less than 100,000 people each, were falling almost every week in Donbass. There was a city of Severodonetsk. There was after that Lysychansk, and then everyone felt that Bakhmut was going to be next, and the Russians were pushing onward and onward. Ukrainians had actually retreated from places like Severodonetsk, which was very difficult to defend, given it was a low-lying place. And they retreated back toward Bakhmut. And the Russians they seemed to put all of their stock in being able to take that city after having failed to take something like Kyiv, or after Ukraine came back and liberated the city of Kherson. And then we saw the past weeks, or actually really the past months, this very public drama between the Russian mercenary leader of the Wagner group and the Kremlin. Now, we don't know if that was a show or what, but it's very, well, I mean, Bakhmut seems to be totally under Russian control, maybe except for a few blocks. It's not even a place. I mean, it's completely annihilated, and it was so awful to see Russia when they were, they shared on Twitter a photo of the Russian flag on somewhere in Bakhmut, and said, "We've liberated the city." There's nothing there. They've destroyed it. And how could you ever use the word liberate in that context? But there's something really fascinating happening right now. The day, almost to the day, when it seems that Russia can claim Bakhmut fully, we have this extraordinary events north of Kharkiv region in Russia, and there is the Free Legion of Russia. I want to make sure I get their name correctly. It's clear that there has been a force from within Ukraine has moved into Russian territory, into the city of Belgorod, which is not far from Kharkiv, and the details are of course murky and developing, but it seems that this is a force of Russian citizens, Russian fighters, who they formed this legion in the early hours and days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. They did not want to, these are people who refused to put up with the Kremlin's actions, and they fight under not the Russian flag. They fight under a new flag they've created that's blue and white. They wanted to take the red out of the Russian flag, to take the blood and the war and the hatred out of the Russian flag. And this force, and perhaps with a few others, I have accounts from people who've been in Bakhmut. And I'm sorry, the official name of this legion is called the Freedom for Russia Legion, consisting of Russians. And it seems that they were fighting in Bakhmut. Now, in Bakhmut, the Ukrainians sustained horrible losses. As I've said before, I mean, everyone here knows someone who's lost a life or lost a limb in Bakhmut and nearby. But the Russians also sustained horrible losses, because the reason why Ukraine couldn't push Russia back so easily is Russia just threw body after body, not really caring, it seems, for the lives of their soldiers into Bakhmut. And it seems that this Freedom for Russia Legion was fighting in Bakhmut, and then Ukraine sort of in the past week let the Russians sort of take the whole city, and Ukraine has been maneuvering. I mean, we hear all the talk of a counteroffensive. There's obviously lots of secrecy, but it is. It has to be an embarrassment to Russia that the city of Belgorod, the region of Belgorod, is being approached, and part of it is there are pro-Ukrainian forces on the Russian territory, and then you hear from the Russians, warning their citizens about this new aggression. But we have to remember, I spent a lot of time in Kharkiv. So many of the Russian missiles that hit Kharkiv, often before the air raid alarm could sound, came from Belgorod. So this was the city that was, because I saw, for example, there's a headline in The Guardian saying, from the UK, saying that, now Belgorod is being dragged into the war. But, now they're having to face what war really is, because it's from that city that so much hell has been unleashed. And Ukrainians are, so as I've said before, Ukrainians, when there is news like this, everyone's watching it and paying attention and keeping calm and focused. But you do see in Ukrainian social media, they're starting to call it Belgorod, which is the Ukrainian pronunciation. It means white city because it's a place very abundant in limestone. And so I think, if you look at what's been happening with the G7 meeting last week, and increasingly there's been sort of this chorus in the media about counteroffensive. You tend to hear that more from people outside of Ukraine than within Ukraine. But there was sort of a sense that Ukraine has to do something, has to captivate the world again in order to keep getting support. And perhaps this is what we're seeing right now with whatever this Freedom for Russia Legion is doing, and probably to some degree coordinating, I think we can say almost certainly coordinating with the high command from Ukraine, what is going on just across that border, not so far from the city of Kharkiv.
For quite a while now, we've been hearing about a spring offensive, that Ukraine would be starting a spring offensive. President Zelensky has said that. Why would everybody talk about this? Why tip off Russia that that's coming?
Well, I think there has been, Ukraine has often throughout this had to have a sort of a delicate dance. Like, in those first hours and weeks of the war, Ukraine really could not admit weakness, because it would be, it's hard to remember now, but there was not there was support from regular citizens around the world, but the leadership in Berlin and in Paris and many other capitals was not so keen on helping Ukraine back then. And so Ukraine had to prove that investing in the military would pay off. And then one of the reasons why in the last summer and last fall, often cited reason for reluctance to give Ukraine new weapons, instead of giving them old weapons, was that, this great technology might fall into Russian hands. Ukrainians really had to prove themselves. And in order to get the tanks, in October last year, it seemed impossible that anyone would send, the United States would approve sending Abrams tanks to Ukraine, or that Germany would allow the Leopard tanks. And eventually that has changed. And now, we have President Biden giving permission for other countries to send F-16s. And so the part of it, Ukraine has to, this is the situation. I think it's highly unusual in this way that, while Zelensky can talk with world leaders, he still has to convince publics and Congresses and parliaments around the world that, not to lose heart in Ukraine. And so you have to tease, you got to keep secrecy, but you have to let people know that you're doing something. And that is extremely difficult, but I think Ukrainians are probably handling that pretty well right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I heard the former ambassador to Russia in the United States talking yesterday about how Putin is more desperate and therefore more dangerous now than he has ever been. Appreciate you keeping us posted as always, Joseph. And like they say to the reporters on the ground there, stay safe. We'll talk tomorrow.
Well, I'm good afternoon from the mountains, where I hear wolves crying and no air alarms, but soon I'll be back.
I like that scene. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?